I find it's a an ever important issue. The title, so to speak, the headline for today was Actionable Hope. I was inspired by a TED Talk by a naturalist who wanted to engage more people in the natural sciences, and he came up with this idea called the I Naturalist, and there's a link in the email to it to the TED Talk. And what it was, a very simple idea. He created an app that tied into the smartphones, and people could take pictures of little animals, creatures, bugs, plants, things that they find beautiful or unusual, and then upload them to their database and their website. And they found a lot of them were species that were previously unknown. So I thought, how cool is that? But then because it's so easy, and every kid's got an iPhone, right? So they would have these days where everybody would go out and into an area and photograph stuff and send it in and add to the database. So it's the talk is really interesting because he goes through some of the things that were new species, and one of them is a ferret that got into some guy's bathroom, and it had never been photographed before. So that whole thing made me think of how powerful compassion is as a motivator for action. And we've talked about it some before, and particularly with when doing into the MSC exercises, they talk about compassion as a motivator, as motivation. And sometimes we got to sort of examine ourselves and ask us that question, like if we wanted to do something, what is our motivation? And see if we can see if there's anything other than compassion there. And if there is, then we work on that. And what I found is that, some of the people that have done really important things in terms of benefit to humanity and such have just taken the position that, no, this cannot stand. This is not right. And it's one of the things that the protests here now over, No Kings, the No Kings movement. For the most part, it is primarily motivated by compassion. But it's going into the news as anti-Trump, which to me is not compassion. Someone asked Mother Teresa back in the 60s if they were putting on an anti-war movement, anti-war protest for Vietnam, the war in Vietnam, and she declined. She said, well, if you want to do something that's for something, let me know. We live in a world of success and defeat, happiness and fear, of good and bad, good and evil, and all that. And we know from the wise ones like Confucius and all the contemplatives is that revenge never works. If we want to overcome or do somebody in, or we feel we just hate them, and hatred is the problem, and it's never successful. We can see examples of that every day in the news. People hating each other and mistreating each other, thinking somehow they're going to make a better world if they bomb more people. It just simply doesn't work. And so I love this fellow's idea because it is easy, it's simple, it doesn't cost much, it adds a tremendous amount to a natural science database, and It's got all these kids running around in nature, looking at things, looking at plants and looking at trees and little bugs crawling around and stuff. It's getting their attention into nature, into the natural world, which I just thought was absolutely brilliant. So to me, it's an example of we got to do something. What can we do? And he came up with this kind of eloquent answer. So, in other words, he just asked, how can I really benefit here? How can I bring some benefit to this situation? Because all the research that I've read on kids and screens is really pretty bad. So how are we going to fight that? Well, that right away is the wrong approach. How are you going to fight that? What are you going to take away their phones? That's not going to work. Plus, they're at a point in their lives where they need to connect with other people. So the problem is not the phone. The problem is that they're not connecting with people, and they're not connecting with nature. It also dovetails when I've talked about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. There's the fight, flight, freeze, fawn part of our brain, and that's a whole separate nervous system to the rest and digest part of our brain. That's where all the gratitude and wisdom and connection and sense of well-being is, right? The only problem is that they vary inversely. Some of the people I work with who say that they have a lot of anxiety. Well, we have to work with the anxiety to a degree to keep things from running off the rails, how to avoid panic attacks and that sort of those practical things. But then the other things, the other side of their nervous system just isn't working. Either they were raised in a family where everything was terrible and you had to stay on your toes to stay out of the way, or there was abuse or trauma or what have you. You can't, in that kind of a situation, a child cannot relax and enjoy life and connect with family. So if they're not connecting with family, not connecting with others, they feel like they always have to perform or they have to stay out of the way or whatever, this parasympathetic nervous system doesn't really develop fully. And so the task is in that situation, and also for us in general, particularly in these times, the more difficult things become, that we always do the best we can to balance out our nervous system. If something happens that we're particularly upset about, that's okay, because outrage is the appropriate response to a lot of things that are going on. But the next step is, what am I going to do about it? So if we just suppress it, then that harms us. If we lash out, that harms them and us. So what are we going to do? We go back and take a look at our motivation. And how can I be of benefit, or how can I be of service here? And sometimes these little ideas like the scientist had is really a great and wonderful idea. And that comes out of this realm of compassion. And I want to emphasize here too that wisdom, anytime I say wisdom or I say compassion, I really mean one as dominant at the moment, but they're one and the same. Right, so wisdom leads to compassion, and compassion includes wisdom, because wisdom is like the guide for compassion. So when we find ourselves in a dilemma where there's something going on that we find really goes against the grain of our core values, it's like we got to do something. And so we've talked on a number of occasions about how important it is to do something, whatever it may be. And that comes, I believe, from within. Because we can sit and try to think all day about, this and that, and, we can try to figure things out and come up with these ideas, but that's not where the best ideas come from. The ideas come sort of intuitively. They come from within. And they arise as a result of compassion and a commitment to help however we can. And then something happens and we get busy and things begin to change. We begin to help. Now, compassion is, we may not get immediate results with compassion. It's not like if somebody's really having a fit, you give them a shot of Haldol or Thorazine. You'll get an immediate, they'll calm down pretty quickly. Or if somebody's feeling all anxious and stuff, you give them a couple of drinks to calm right down. Compassion doesn't work that way. Compassion sometimes takes time. And that's why the wisdom part is so important, because the wisdom part can keep us from running out and doing something that we think may do really well, but it doesn't, it's ineffective, or it doesn't work, or it backfires, or something, or things happen that we hadn't planned on. So it's best to really apply our awareness to our own insight and compassion and our motivation. And that, who knows what can happen and how things can change. The story I tell frequently about the woman with the sign and goes down to Austin, to the Capitol, and big sign that says MAGA, Mothers Against Greg Abbott. and it just, it just, that now there's an organization. So we never really know how it's all going to work out. Like the Edmund Pettus Bridge incident. They knew they had to go, and they knew the bosses of the nightclubs would be there. I don't think they had any idea that they were actually going to get clubbed, but that they probably all figured that they were going to go to jail. But that has turned into a monument in our culture about the power of nonviolence. And it changed a lot of things. A lot of people got hurt. But that's really what people in the civil rights movement signed up for. That is the power of nonviolence, Martin Luther King's commitment to nonviolence. And I don't know if anybody's seen them. There's footage around of the early civil rights protests. Where they bring out dogs and water cannons, or there's some black guys sitting at a counter and they start throwing eggs at them. I mean, it was really horrendous, with a lot of things that people had to go through in order to make their point. And it was, it was pure compassion. There's somebody innocent ordering a sandwich, and they get eggs thrown at them. And so we've moved past the 60s, so now that sort of thing is global, which makes it a little more difficult. And it's happening all over the world in one way or another. And, the old phrase has been around for a long, long time: think globally but act locally. And it's amazing what we can do when we hook up with people of like mind in some way or another. And whatever it is that we do. Art is a wonderful means, plays, there's all kinds of stuff we can do. But again, it doesn't come from the sort of rational mind. It comes from the intuitive mind that's the authentic self, and under the guidance and power of wisdom and compassion. And that's what I believe led Gandhi to make do his walk to the ocean and go make salt. Simple. And by the time he got to the ocean, I don't know how many thousands of people there were. And it was a point where the British Army couldn't stop it. They'd have to kill or imprison thousands of innocent people. So what are you going to do? It's just brilliant. So we get solutions to things that we could never cook up on our own through our intellect. and they're in a sense pure. Because it's not about revenge, it's not about... Does anyone remember the Hunger Games movies and the two Mockingjay movies? Really, I hadn't seen them in a long time, and my granddaughter is really into them, so I watched them again. There's a really important point made in the Mockingjay 2 movie, and it was where the president of the resistance, she was like the headquarters of the resistance movement to the Imperium, or whoever it was, and President Snow. Anyway, the Mockingjay figured out that the so-called president wasn't really going to change anything. She was just bringing out, she wanted to get rid of Snow so she could step into power. And that was a real problem. She had to take care of that. But it was a wonderful lesson that the president, President Cohen, was right in the sense of resisting oppression. But the way she did it was trying to meet power with power. And all that begets is more power. And Martin Luther King and Gandhi met power with love, compassion. You know, because can you imagine an entire nation not being prevented from making their own salt, which they'd done for centuries? You know, that's just, it's crazy. And that somehow somebody with dark skin isn't a human being. I mean, it's like, where does that come from? And so we don't fight power with power. We don't fight at all. We just be the answer. And when we do that, what we're doing is we are just being the solution. We're trying to fight the problem. We're fighting laggards. Well, the laggards are never going to change. Plus, they've got all the toys. and so the answer is being the answer as best we can in some way, and whatever it may be. I mean, I know people just write every week. They write something to their congressperson. That sort of thing. Whether it does any good or not, who knows? But, as we talk frequently in here, the important thing is to be avoided absolutely is that feeling of helplessness and futility. And that leads right into hopelessness, and that is really not good. So it comes back to, full circle, to working with compassion and to getting in touch with what we feel the most passionate about, that if we could provide an answer for it, what area would that be? When we do that, we kind of provides us with a direction and a motivation, with meaning and purpose. The meaning is to make the world a better place, and the purpose is to make the world a better place, and the meaning is that we need to do something. So I thought today we'd do one of the basic, a bit of an adaptation, but one of the basic mindful self-compassion exercises, and to get in touch with our own sense of compassion, meaning considering the world as a whole, which is in dire need of some sanity, just asking the question, how can I help? It's really a pretty simple question. You know, it's like if you go over to a friend's house and you go over there, and in the drive over there they had something happen, like their water heater broke or something happened. Well, you walk in and you go, how can I help? You know, and so the world in a sense is this one community that we all have, and it's like, woo, wow, we got a problem here. How can I help? And whatever it is, whether it's sweeping the floor or, taking care of the cat so it doesn't run out into the street, that sort of thing. But whatever it is we can do it. Whether our task is to spread the spirit of enjoyment. I think often if people don't have this information, you can email me, but there's a musician called Xavier Diaz. He's Catalonian. And he's got a choral group that I can't pronounce their name, but I think they're also Catalonian. But they play the most joyous music. It's just unbelievable. And so there's a lot of really joyous music around, particularly from traditional origins. So I think it's important to listen to joyous things, to remind us that, yes, it is possible to be joyous. It's about being the solution. All the people that are out there right now working small to large farms with organically, getting 2 or 3 times the yield with an increase in nutrition for the vegetables, rather than sitting around trying to fight the regulations and fight this and fight that, and just go and do it. And that becomes the model, and then other people, oh, that's a good idea. And then say, well, maybe, can you help me with that? Sure, I'd be happy to help you with that. And people passing it on one to another, because it's probably a good idea is that we know how to raise our own food, because agribusiness is not doing us any favors in that regard. Just, let's say the house that I mentioned just a moment ago with a hot water heater, let's say there was a tornado. Half the roof is off and everything is tossed upside down in the house. Well, we got a lot of work to do. So you start. And when we do, this sense of doom and gloom begins to go away. And we get more ideas and connect with more people. And that's really, because I determined quite a while ago, I've said this before, but when doing this, it was suggested that in general, in doing any presentation, who is your audience? That's the first thing to determine. Who are you talking to? And so I realized that I wanted to talk with innovators and early adopters. And everybody else, they're going to have to figure out later. But the people who are the innovators and the early adopters, that's where the solutions lie, and that's where the new perspectives lie, and the new paradigm lies. And the laggards, you're not going to go to any of these world leaders and say, hey, we don't like what you're doing. You're like causing all this misery. Please stop. It's never going to work. I mean, you can't. They're not reasonable people. They push against logic, and it makes them worse. So you're just going to let them go and do whatever they're going to do, however horrible it is. But that's just what they're going to do. But it's the innovators and the early adopters that will be left after the dust settles, and we'll know how to raise our own food and communicate and make community. And so let's get to it. So we will, as usual, we're going to do a fairly long mindfulness meditation, and then go into the compassion exercise, self-compassion exercise. And yes, we start with ourselves, and then we move outward. Again, it's the idea of just raising the question, or our own awareness, how do I motivate with compassion? If I could really change anything, is there any place on earth that I could wave a magic wand to make it better? What would that be? What calls to me directly? What calls to me most directly about something that's going on in the world? And whatever pops up, using that as motivation for practice, for generating compassion. Because at this point, this is about resonating compassion. And that's the main action for today here. And resonating that compassion eventually will turn into some some action that that can be taken. Okay, so everybody find your special spot, special place. And settling in, and we'll begin. And just settling in and settling down. Taking our place where we are, right here, right now. Allowing ourselves to inhabit our body as best we can, to be here now, letting go of thoughts of the past or the future as best we can. That when they arise, just recognizing the thoughts and releasing them and returning to the present moment. And perhaps noticing the points of contact with the chair or the floor, or wherever you're sitting. Kind of further realizing you have this body, sort of like our spacesuit. And just being at home in it for a few moments as it is. And allowing our awareness to rest in the present moment as best we can. And if our awareness wanders off, simply noticing without criticism or judgment, it's wandered off, and bringing our awareness back to the here and now. And in the here and now, there's really nothing to figure out. It just is. And perhaps realizing how important it is every once in a while to do just this, to just be. And if we notice any hesitation or anxiety, tension, letting that just simply flow away. And perhaps seeing that just in this present moment, just being, future and the past doesn't really matter. Because just being is enough. And continuing to settle into this, settling down. With surrender and acceptance. And allowing ourselves to rest in the present moment in this equanimity as best we can. And now allowing our attention to be aware of compassion and allowing compassion to flow into this space. Compassion for oneself. For all the rough spots in life that we've come through, and all the joys, and the very fact of our existence, our birth, miraculous in and of itself. But life is not easy for anyone. And life is not easy for anyone. Reminding ourselves of the difficulties that we've come through, overcome, and perhaps still carry a few with us. but the fact that we are here now. On the path of compassion and wisdom with other like-minded people. Allowing the compassion into this space and arising however you visualize it, just as a feeling sometimes, or a light, or whatever it may be, feeling of warmth. Knowing that we have endured much and overcome much and still endure. And allowing ourselves to receive this compassion. Who knows where it comes from? Some say it has no beginning and no end. And that it is always available if we turn toward it and allow it. And the difficulties we can look upon with compassion and perhaps even gratitude. For all that and all of our work that we've done, all that we've come through has brought us right here to this very moment. And allowing ourselves the grace of compassion. It's not been easy at times, but it is all good. And allowing ourselves to fill up with this compassion. Filled to the brim. Stretching the seams. And bringing to mind a person or persons, large or small, the earth, the universe, our galaxy, or just a neighbor next door, or the people we read about in the papers. Extending this compassion in a manner that helps to bring resolution to the difficulties we feel. And if it's just with another person, that's fine. Letting the compassion and the wisdom guide the path. And as we radiate out this compassion, realizing that there is an endless supply at our service, inexhaustible. And adding the resonance of compassion, addressing, receiving, and giving to whatever arises this compassion, and resonating with it in some way. We can think of specific instances or the whole earth, wherever the wisdom leads you. And letting the compassion do the work. And sensing that perhaps beyond reason, the situation at hand is made better or just different in some way. And that we too have been made different a little bit. And perhaps noticing as we do this exercise, how simple and easy And perhaps seeing that the flow is a flow. And all we have to do is tap into it and allow it. And in this we don't judge. Just like the rain and the sun, don't discriminate. And as this connection ripens and thrives, knowing that perhaps this is all we can do today or at this very moment. Realizing that somehow we have made a contribution toward resolution through compassion. And in the fullness of the exercise, coming to conclusion. Alive with the resonance and the process. Returning to a place of equanimity. And coming back to the present moment. And allowing our bodies to absorb this experience as fully as you can. Like a sponge absorbs water. So that when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day and come back to it at any time.